Welcome to SpiritLevel, the podcast that explores spirit, mystery, inspiration, and the ancient art of divination through the lens of modern living. I'm Jamie.
And I'm Fingal.
And we're your hosts. In this podcast, we have a mix of guest speakers asking what spirituality means to them, talking heads between Fingal and me, our experiences, what's helped us along our paths, and what could inspire you, and maybe some meditations along the way. Hi, Finn.
Hi, Jamie.
Here we are again. It's already beginning to feel familiar.
I thought you were going to say, it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Been and gone. God, that was age. It's funny, isn't it, how quickly that's gone?
I know. Oh, don't.
Crazy.
Don't. We're coming into springtime, thank goodness.
Yeah, so nice.
It's actually one of the rare times that I know it sounds silly, but really been attuned to that change of season. You know, sometimes it just happens. You're like, oh, we're in spring. How did that happen? But I've really felt it creep up on us this time. It's like this anticipation and joy.
Well, I now know it's coming as well. It's that having to put the eye mask on in the morning because the sun started to come up earlier. So having the eye mask ready at hand because we want to lie in a little bit more. We should be getting up, going to the beach or something, but hey ho.
You should see the setup for Jamie's sleep. It is quite the undertaking.
Mm-hmm. Earplugs. That's because you snore.
I don't.
I have had to wear earplugs since we met.
Stop spreading these vicious rumours.
You snore.
That's absolute nonsense.
Tell that to the voice notes on my phone. Have I ever played you those? I've got so many.
Oh my God, you creep. You absolute creep.
Sometimes when it's really annoying me.
Is this in case we divorce? You can use it for
Absolutely. Anyway, here we are. We're back. And one of the most visited pages on our website, to our surprise, once we've started doing a little bit of market research.
But when we actually started running a company and stopped doing it from the seat of our pants.
Yeah, because we've now got people to answer to. We have like a marketing team and we have to have marketing team meetings, which is...
you love them, don't you, Jamie? You absolutely adore them.
Love you guys.
It's nothing against them.
No.
It just Jamie's boredom threshold is what one might call low. He kind of switches off after the first 10 minutes, bless him. But no, it has been very good.
It's been really good. It's really made us kind of look at what's working, what's not, what people want. And we realised that the most visited page on our website is Am I Psychic? Which is a blog post that was done, I think, ages ago.
Yeah, it's a quiz.
It's a quiz, that's right.
Yeah, it's a quiz. It's like a 10-question quiz. And it tells you at the end whether you may have psychic tendencies, shall we say. Always makes me laugh when we come onto this subject because I'm always reminded of your mum.
Oh, right.
Well, it's a bit of a funny one because, you know...
Say what you want, she doesn't listen.
All right. Because I think, well, it's partly your mum and your friends. Because when we met, you're obviously working in the yoga space. But the more and more we've been together and the longer it's gone on, you've obviously started doing psychic readings and past life regressions and all of this stuff. And I think a couple of your friends have raised an eyebrow going, how's he doing this stuff now? Unbeknownst to them that you've been going for psychic readings since you were, 16?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. So actually, you've been involved in this world much longer than I have. Yeah. Much, much longer. So I think it's that there are many, many misconceptions around am I psychic? Do you want to come up? Come on then. Sorry, I'm just lifting Fairfax up. He's feeling a bit left out. A lot of misconceptions, and I remember your mum in particular saying, oh, isn't it something you can't train to be a psychic? It's just something you're innately born with. And to a certain degree, kind of yes. I know we spoke about this on the last season. It's a bit like a musical aptitude. Some people are just born and they're able to play the scales and they have that musical ear and they pick it up instantaneously. And then there are those that they can toil away for hours and hours and hours, years and years and years, learning the scales, and actually it's never going to be that musical. And the same is true with a psychic ability, but it is definitely something you can train. And what we thought might be fun and edifying and illuminating for today's podcast is giving some practical tips and advice. Okay, so it's this thing of, well, how do you know if you're psychic? Being number one. And number two is if you've got an inclination that you are, and even what is being psychic, if you have an inclination that you are, what should you do next?
Well, the thing is, I think people have, without dumbing it down, I really believe it is something that's there in all of us. It's just we are led to believe that it's something extraordinary. I actually believe that if we really simplify it and strip away all of the noise of your thoughts, of what's going on in your head, of the external world, of the environmental factors, of everything else, and we just strip it back and we just get still and we start, it's like praying, right? It's having if you believe in a God and you're having a conversation with God, there are answers that will come through from you asking questions to that God, and the answers coming through. And I just don't.
That's a nice way of looking at it.
It's no different this way. We are tapping into something that we don't really know too much about, but once we start tapping into it and we start receiving insights, you start realizing that there must be something to this because we're proven right too many times. And coming from somebody who has now been doing this full time for a year, but has really struggled with that imposter syndrome, we've talked about this before, for a long, long time. I think what I'm trying to say is I think what we need to do is normalize this a little bit more. We need to stop thinking of it as something that's only for the elite and the special and the gifted and the gods. And actually, it's something that is enabled. It's something that's out there.
Just call yourself a god.
No, that's what you would call yourself. Let's be honest. Sitting there in his white from head to toe.
I don't have a god complex, listeners.
But you know what I mean? It's that thing where we are putting this ability onto such a huge on a huge pedestal in a way.
Well, yes and no. Like yes, in a certain.
Maybe it's just because the way it comes to me is different to how it comes to others. Like it's quite natural.
Yeah, it's quite everyday for you in a certain way. But I remember reading from Caroline Maj. She once said she's been working so intuitively for so long. It is just an extension of her senses, much like taste, smell, touch, sight. It's just a natural way that she interacts with things. And it is that it's kind of that paradox. It's that it's contradictory that that it gets to a certain point in the work that it does feel really easy, and you kind of start thinking, actually, am I channeling this or is this coming from me? Because that line, that distinction becomes kind of, it feels less and less effortful, let's say. So there is that thing where it does just become a natural extension of your everyday. But as we well know, there are many, many people that are ready to ridicule it. I don't know if people have seen that certain Channel 4 documentary.
Yeah.
And I won't go into that too much. I don't want to get in hot water. But there's a certain Channel 4 documentary where I suppose part of... I think that documentary was quite nuanced anyway, and there was lots of things from either side. But it didn't look that favourably at psychics, let's say. And certainly when journalists or particularly TV production companies have got in contact with us, I have been very cautious or very I've had to pay due diligence in terms of asking, is this going to be shown in a favourable light? Because I have no interest in peddling that narrative and that rhetoric of oh, let's expose psychics. I think it's really damaging. I think it's way overdue that we actually go the other side and say, how is psychic readings helping people? What's actually going on? What are the instances where it's really helping transform people's lives? Because a lot of the time it wants to be they're taking advantage of people. And, of course there are those that are unscrupulous out there, but that happens in every industry. So I'm starting to wear a little bit thin of that narrative. What is great is I certainly feel that the tide is turning. And something we were discussing before we came on was our most visited page is Am I Psychic, as Jamie discussed there. When I started the Wellness Foundry, everybody said, oh, you can't do tarot, it's too niche. And well, how are you going to, it's too niche, how are you ever going to scale that? But we've been proven time and time again with the amazing brands that we've worked with the amount that people are searching these terms, am I psychic, that it's a real hunger. And also as a collective conscience, we are up-leveling. We're having to shift and change, and it's becoming more and more widespread and kind of more and more known. So this is why people are starting to ask these questions, and more people are starting to feel that something else might be going on.
So I'm just wondering then, what would be useful for listeners to hear from us in terms of Am I Psychic?
Well, I suppose the first thing is, if you're asking the question, then you probably are. I can't really imagine a time where somebody is pondering that question or reflecting on that question. And, it's a little bit like asking, I know it's a bit of a strange analogy, but it's a bit like, am I gay? I'm like, well, if you're kind of asking the question, then maybe, I don't know, maybe that doesn't really apply. Have I got really off-piste?
I don't know. It's,
do you see what I mean, though? It's a bit like it kind of, everything's a spectrum, right? Everything's a spectrum. So although you might be kind of asking yourself, oh, am I gay? Because, it's just a fleeting, wandering question. It's like, well, you could sit anywhere on that scale. It's like, I'm probably 95% gay, I would say. But there is that 5% kind of little wiggle room. And I think the same is with being intuitive or psychic.
I suppose the difference is with being gay, it's much more tangible, isn't it? Well,
yes and no, I suppose. There must be instances for people where they, excuse me for going into my dating history, but I've dated a man that said, I've never been attracted to another man other than you, like before or after. It was just purely I suppose that's what one might call a pansexual, is like you're really just attracted to that person. So I don't think it's always as clear cut in a certain way, but yeah.
No, yeah.
I suppose I've gone a bit off topic, but I suppose what I'm trying to say is the very fact that you're curious about that world and curious about that is probably indication that, yes, there is something else going on. Otherwise, it wouldn't kind of come across your path in any sort of way. So kind of first off, if you're asking that question, am I psychic? Probably. Some indications that you might be psychic. Well, I suppose let's start with what is being psychic. What does it mean to you to be psychic?
For me, it is coming from somewhere else, in a sense that I'm having to get my energies quite still, quite grounded. And then it's not like a thinking, it's like a knowing for me. That's but that's because I'm very claircognizant. So it's like, which means I do have just a knowing. It's like, it's almost like a stream of consciousness that comes through me that isn't coming from my mind, so to speak. It's coming from a place of a bigger pool of information, is how I see it.
I like that description. I really like that description.
Because it's not always things that I actually know. It's things sometimes that it's a bit like when you're, a bit like when you are just in flow, with things, when everything is in flow and you're at your best and everything just aligns, when you're in tune with yourself or when you're connected to spirit, things can just flow and you're not getting in your own way of analysing it, criticising it, judging it. You're just allowing that expression to come through without any filter. Although you are filtering it because you're having to filter it in terms of the messages you're giving and making sure they're coming across with compassion and, you know, being mindful of what you say with accuracy. But it is kind of unfiltered in some way. Does that make sense?
Completely. I remember one of my tutors once telling me, if you're truly working with spirit, you never have to worry about what you say anyway, because it's, you know, they know the way to put it and the language to put it in, how forceful to be and how much to pull back and all of that stuff. But, you know, we still have to be conscious and responsible that we are putting it in a delicate way. But I think there's two things that you've said that are really key there in terms of, I suppose there's a slight difference for me between being psychic and being a psychic reader. So for me, being psychic, and this is where I think often it gets a little bit blurred, but I suppose for me, being psychic is understanding the world beyond the five senses. Mm-hmm. So we understand the world beyond kind of touch, feel, look, taste, touch, all of those things. Keep saying touch, but you know what I mean. Those five senses. It's information that is available to us that extends beyond that. The most obvious version being, and I always give this example of, he's got a really bad aura around him, or I just love her aura. She's, you know, that is.
Or you walk into a space and the energy in here is weird.
Yes.
You could cut the tension here with a knife.
That's all your psychic senses in play. And then that might become slightly more acute in the way of you're thinking about somebody and then that very moment somebody calls you, or you decide to do something that kind of doesn't make rational sense all of a sudden, a bit like, do you know what, I'm not going to take this bus, I'm going to take the next one. And then once you get on the bus, your best friend's there, or whatever it might be. So that's kind of your psychic senses in play. And it doesn't necessarily have to go any further than that. Mm-hmm. To be a psychic reader, I suppose, is, and the really pivotal word I feel that you used there was consciousness. Conscious. It doesn't feel like it's coming from our consciousness. We are connecting or communicating with a different consciousness. That's what our spirit guides are. That's all of that stuff, is that it's their thoughts, their words, their ideas are being planted in our minds so we can speak them. But the more you work, the more you're able to distinguish, no, this isn't my thinking. This isn't. And sadly, I think a lot of that oftentimes gets chalked up as, I'm just imagining it. I don't know where, there's a flight of fancy that's just popped into my mind. The other really important thing that you said was, and I always use the computer analogy for this, it's like you've got the cloud, like the iCloud, and you can download a piece of information onto your hard drive and share it. That's often what kind of tapping into the collective consciousness can also be. So it doesn't necessarily have to come from our guides, but the kind of collective consciousness at large. But other symbols of kind of, am I psychic? Lots of synchronicities, serendipity in your life. Again, just knowing things and not knowing where that comes from, those kind of intuitive hits. Dreams, big one, particularly for me. Again, I think I spoke about that in the first episode of the last series.
Numerology. People seeing numbers.
Yeah, the patterns of life.
Of things.
It's a bit like in the Matrix, isn't it? It's like blue pill and red pill, and then you get unplugged, and then you start seeing it's a bit like a stage. You're either in front of the curtain or behind the curtain, and seeing synchronicities and that numerology and those kind of things is a little bit, there's something else larger at play here. And I really love what you said there in terms of, this is ordinary. It's actually just seeing the natural rhythm of things and the natural working of things. It's not exceptional to necessarily be able to, what makes us stand apart is that we've been doing it for longer. And we've been practicing a lot. We've done probably thousands of readings, but I certainly have thousands of readings. That's, I think, what makes it kind of different necessarily, but for anybody. And the other big one for the am I psychic, I always say, is empath's overwhelm. And this is one that a lot of people identify with, is being able to pick up on the emotions of other people, or feeling kind of either slightly drained or dumped on emotionally by other people, and not being able to set up those barriers.
Struggling with large groups or noisy environments or anything that's really overwhelming like that's because there's too much going on. Like, you used to have that when we first started dating. You were going through that. You couldn't be on the tube, and I was always like, what is wrong with him? It's like you were just you were just everywhere, but not, you just couldn't switch off from it. And that was, I suppose, then learning those boundaries and how to ground properly and how to switch. Because people always say, like, is this not so annoying? How does this not become too much? How do you switch it off? Well, you do learn, and you have to switch it off. You have to be able we have to be able to live in this world. So we have to be able to find ways of doing that. I think a lot of it is intention, isn't it? If we look at anything opening up and closing down, it's all intention based. And I'm getting a bit better, but I can often not close down. And you always know, because my energy is different, and there's just a lot of talking, a lot of information coming out. And it's nice to be in that space, but if you're in that space constantly, it will take everything from you and drain you. And the other thing I wanted to say, it's reminding me what you were talking about on retreat a little while ago, about nature and about how we've become so separated from nature. And it's the same with this. We've become so separated from ourselves. It's the same thing. Like, we are so wound up with technology and with the world that we're living in, because we're moving at this extraordinary fast pace. We've got AI now and all of these new technologies that are basically taking us away from ourselves and depending on something outside of ourselves. And it's the same as nature, and how we're not in tune with nature anymore. And it's the same, we're not in tune with ourselves. We're more in tune with ourselves. We can start to access these psychic abilities again. So it's about less of the external, less of focusing on the things outside of us, and more about focusing on ourselves.
Yeah, because this is often a thing that gets overlooked, is, okay, it might be really exciting and tempting and sexy in a certain way to develop your psychic gifts, and we'll talk a little bit of how you might do that. But actually, that it requires a lot of self-development simultaneously. You have to process, and I think we've spoken about this at length, but I often have to process unresolved parts of ourselves, unresolved parts of our history, and kind of integrate that too. But I think you're completely right in terms of this fast pace is, often we used to be able to go, oh, well, let me percolate on that. Let me stew on that. Let me kind of have some time to reflect on that and kind of cogitate and figure out what my thinking is about that. But now we're expected, right, give me the answer this second. Emails have got to be answered instantly. It's like literally instant messenger. It's like now. So it's taking away our ability to just kind of pause and reflect and find.
And that's like your intuition in a way kicking in a bit. It's not always in the mind. Sometimes we need time to reflect so that then we can let some of these other subtleties come through and what we're feeling. And there's a lot more going on than just what's in the mind. And that's the thing, that we've become so obsessed with the mind since we moved into that era of technology.
Well, back in the 14th century, when we entered into the world of kind of rational thought, and rationality was king, and mathematics and science and astronomy, and which all have their place, absolutely. But we didn't need to chuck baby out with bathwater and say anything that was kind of intuitively led, or to do with the imagination, or to do with instinct, or those cycles that you're talking about. It's like, oh no, that all where's the proof? It needs to be proven. And actually this is often what puts people off, is that they try and explain to others what their instincts are indicating, what their intuition is indicating, when they have a psychic hit necessarily, they can't express that in rational way. Imagine if you were standing with your partner and the bus comes and you said to your partner, we're not meant to get on this bus. And your partner goes, what are you talking about? We've been waiting 15 minutes for this bus. We're going to have to wait another 15 if we don't. Are you absolutely nuts? Let's get on this bus. And if you go, no, honestly, we should not get on this bus, it would be an irritant. You'd just be like, what is wrong with you? Never mind that actually you might get on that bus and your intuition might be guarding you against a situation you're not meant to be in. That's often the issue. That's often why people look at you like you're completely nuts. And that's often why the people that we meet going, oh, I just feel like I'm making it all up, or I feel quite isolated and alone around all of that. So I often don't act on those intuitive hits. And if you don't, what happens after time is your intuition just kind of goes, okay, well, there's no point giving you these signals or signs. Because you're not necessarily acting on them. So I really, really kind of encourage, kind of give you license that when those intuitive hits come through, act upon them. And even if they backfire and it all goes to shit, at least you can go, oh, okay, that wasn't an intuitive hit, that was wishful thinking, or that was X, Y, Z. That will kind of give you a clearer indication of what is and isn't your intuitive self.
Have you ever wondered if you have psychic abilities? Perhaps you get those strong gut feelings about things, or you just know when your best friend's about to call. Perhaps you're extremely empathetic and open to other people's emotions. Well, I'm pleased to say that you're not alone. We hear this on a daily basis. And that's why we're back with our next round of psychic development courses that we run 3 times a year. Whether you're completely new to this work or you have a bit of experience, there's something for everyone. In these 6-week live stream courses, you will uncover the skills required to build upon your intuitive and spiritual world. Places are limited and will go fast, so be sure to check out wellnessfoundry.co.uk/courses to find out more and book your place.
One last thing I just want to touch upon around this subject of am I psychic? And then we'll look at maybe some practical steps of how to develop it. I've noticed, particularly in my readings, and I don't know if it's the same for you, those that tend to be very, very creative, tend to be quite intuitive as well. I think I've said this before, but they're almost like sisters. They're like 2 cables in the same fiber optic casing. Also, I don't know, maybe this is just me because of my heritage, but lots of Irish people as well. I find that those spaces where that kind of magic ancestrally hasn't been, dare I say, kind of obliterated or kind of weaned out, I tend to find people tend to be a little bit more intuitive, and also very much those that their relatives were intuitively led. So like grandmothers or mothers that are quite psychic. It's weird, but it does very much tend to be something that's hereditary. There's the old urban myth goes, the 7th child will always be psychic. But yeah, I think a vast majority of us are, and I think more and more people are becoming aware of this and opening up to this because that's what's needed as well. And I've noticed since starting in this work that a lot more of my friends have started psychic development as well, because it's like it is something that is, catches fire, so to speak. Once you've got one little flame, it jumps around. So that's really exciting for me to see that more and more, because it's an amazing, amazing gift. It gives us so much insight and makes things so rich, I find, and that it makes my life harder as well. Just before people start the psychic development course, I always say, this comes with a health warning because it does ruin your life. And in many ways, it does ruin your life because it forces you to examine and look at what is out of balance and what isn't working. Again, I think we've spoken about that at length. But what would be perhaps some of your practical tips? So we've kind of identified, yes, okay, I'm having prophetic dreams, or I'm having intuitive hits about people, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I've just got this sense that something else is going on and I've suddenly become really interested in symbology or synchronicities or angel numbers, all of those things. What might be some practical tips, next steps on how to continue to develop that?
You could use some kind of divination tool.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, it's the tarot. I've recently started working with oracle decks, which I've always had. I've always had oracle decks, since I was really young. They've been around.
I remember going to your room and finding them all in your boxes and
but
stuff.
I haven't used them for long periods of time. And it's funny, I'm really drawn to one again at the moment. And I'm just using that because, again, it's like this, it's touching on this, like you just said, this creative part of you. You know, I pull a card. I don't often read it, to be honest. I think as most psychics will say, the once you get to that level, the tools are, they're almost there for theatre in some way, because the messages are coming through anyway without the cards. But the card just adds another layer. It adds another layer to it. And it's almost like it's either a great starting place, or it's just something that people can relate to. They can tangibly see. Because if you're sat in a reading and you're just talking, and I had somebody say to me the other day, sorry, can I just interrupt you? You just keep saying they and them. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh, that's just because I'm talking with my guides or with spirit, and that's how we. But whereas if you've got a card, something more tangible, you can lay that down and then start talking about it, even though the card might not be what's giving you the messages, spirit's giving you the messages, they can kind of connect to that. So starting with a card or some kind of tool like that, oracle cards, tarot, kind of, I guess it depends with tarot, because I would suggest starting with an oracle deck before you jump straight into tarot, maybe. And just go to a deck that you're drawn to because of the look, or maybe the words, or something you've been recommended, and just start shuffling them and asking a question and pulling some cards and just seeing and playing around with that. I would say is a really, really simple first step.
Yeah, nice.
What would you do?
So I would always say, start with asking for a sign. Start that communication with, because there's a bit of a misconception that being psychic is a solely isolated. It's like I'm psychic or I'm not. A bit like I'm tall or I'm not, or I've got ginger hair or I've not, or I've got brown eyes or I've not. It's not kind of as clear cut as that. It's not as insular as that. It's not a kind of, oh, it's just about you. Being psychic is, and this I'm going to stress again and again and again, it's about relating to the world at large. It's about how you relate to the world at large, how you understand, just as you were saying, the rhythm of things, the cycle of things, the truth of things. You know, it's all very well being psychic, and it can seem kind of, again, quite sexy and dazzling, and oh my God, how did they know that my sister's name was Marie? Like, oh my God, that's that is kind of awe-inspiring, but that's not the purpose. Who cares? Like, your sister's called Marie. Yes, it's kind of evidence that I'm tuned in to you, but that's not where it ends. That's not what's the point. If you came to a reading and I said, your primary school was called Acorn Adventures Primary School. You had two sisters. One's older than you by 7 years. Her name's Marie. She likes the colour pink. You once went on a horse in India and you fell off. If I just reel off these facts about you, it's like, whoop-de-doo. I've just told you all stuff you already know.
Well, that's the very old-fashioned way of working as a psychic, and isn't it? I think that it's been a lot about being evidence. And when people come to see us, if they're in that mindset and they don't get an answer, or they've come thinking, right, I want him to come and say that my grand's name was Mabel and that she died 5 years ago. And if you don't say that, it's like, well, this isn't going to work for me.
And of course, there's a fine balance because we have to give enough evidence that we're talking about you. So it's no point me saying, oh, they're talking about the theatre, and you're thinking, I hate the theatre. I've never been to the theatre. I don't know anybody in the theatre, and I bang on for 30 minutes trying to convince you that they're giving me theatre. That's no good. There are times where you go, oh, I've got this woman next to me and her name is Penelope. Great. If you can take that and you're like, oh my God, that was my neighbour. Amazing. Great. Fabulous. But that's not the point of a reading, right? It is about helping people grow and understand kind of what's next up for them on the spiritual path and what can they lean into and what lessons are there available to them and all of that stuff. So this is the important thing about being psychic, is it's about helping us understand the natural rhythm of things, but also the truth of things. Miriam Margolyes once said, and I love this, she said, the point of life is to become not only wiser, but also kinder. So if we can use our psychic abilities to become more wise and therefore more kind, then that's absolutely what we need.
And I think just approaching any of these things with just this sense of playfulness as well.
Absolutely.
Because it should be fun. It should be something that's creative, that brings you, joy, and something you can share with others. I think it doesn't have to be so serious to start with. You as a professional, you are dealing with subject matters and with people's lives, so it is serious. But I think if you're just starting out and you're curious about this intuitive ability, you can just treat it as play, a bit like a child would, that would be using their imagination. And we've almost told ourselves that there's no time for imagination anymore, and that if we're daydreaming, we're wasting time. And actually, I think that kind of energy leans into and lends itself very well to this kind of spiritual and psychic work.
Definitely.
So opening that channel up, allowing yourself to be that channel for creativity and fun and expression, I think is where a lot of it lies.
And I kind of always say to people when they will say, oh, how do I start? How do I develop my psychic gift? My go-to, well, there's two go-tos. Initial go-tos. One is just start asking for signs from the universe. Be it synchronicities, be it white feathers, be it, we're not, and don't kind of ask, send out the question and then release it and see what comes in, because it might not come in the way that we expect. And that's really important, because we have to cultivate this sense of trust and this sense of belief in kind of larger things. And then secondly is cultivate some stillness. As soon as we start training, we do lots of meditations just to ensure that we can sit in stillness long enough. Because if you can't it's not about clearing your mind necessarily, but settle your mind long enough, then how are you, if you're constantly thinking, oh, I've left the ironing on, I think, what am I going to have for dinner after this sitting? Oh, I might have pan-fried sea bass. Oh, no, but I had that last week. If we're thinking all of that while trying to give a reading, forget it. Only when we come to this place of being settled. So again, ask for a sign, ask for symbols from the universe and allow them to come in. Also ask for assistance. If you want to kind of develop this stuff, say, okay, I'm up for this. I'm up for kind of becoming part of this team. Give me a hand, send me the right people, send me the right information. So kind of start, just as you say, start that conversation with those powers that be. Find stillness and grounding. Really try and settle your energy as much as possible. There is no way on God's green earth that that sensitivity, that awareness, that connectivity is going to come in when your mind is all over the place. Absolutely forget it. So really, the amount of times I sit in the bath and have these huge intuitive hits, and I come out of the bath thinking, oh my God, we've got to do this, because I am settled, because it is the close of the day, because I am kind of just resting in this space. But the problem is we often expect this all to come overnight. And again, this goes back to what you were speaking about. We want everything now. We want the answers now. We want the email. We want the internet. We want everything as quickly as possible. And this does not work like that at all. It's a real process.
And I think finding a community as well is really important. You know, again, we've been on retreat recently, and the one thing that everybody agrees with, it's so nice being around other people that feel the same way, so that they can express what they're feeling, thinking, going through without anybody raising an eyebrow at them, because everyone's there on that same journey. And I think there's something to be said about that, because like you've said, it's still thought of, it's still a bit woo-woo, it's still a bit crazy. If you mention this to somebody that's not been involved in this thing, they're going to have a strong opinion of you in a way.
That's what I find really upsetting, is sometimes like, poor you. Oh, is that what you believe? It's silly you. Yeah. Oh, pat on the head. Oh, silly you for thinking that stuff. And that's what really upsets me, because a lot of these experiences are palpable for people, and they're really, you know, it brings them not only a lot of comfort, but they can bring a lot of confusion if you're starting to interact with the world and think, and you turn around to the wrong person. Yeah. It happened with me on my journey, that I turned around and asked the wrong person, what should I do about this? And they kind of went, well, it's just a theory, all of this psychic stuff. I was like, hang on a second, this isn't a theory. This is what's going on for me. So I wholeheartedly second what you've just said, because it's often the thing that really puts people off is coming out of the spiritual closet. And I think we've spoken about this before, but the more people that do, much like being gay, the more it normalizes it, and the more that other people go, oh, okay, you know. And it's exactly to say, this is ordinary, and it should be treated as ordinary, and it's not, this shouldn't, and thankfully it's not, it's fast becoming mainstream and not this fringe thing. And this is why we're doing talks like this and really trying to encourage and bring these things to the fore. But the more you're able to find people that think like you and are able to kind of support you in those things, the better.
It's just made me revisit something that I used to do that I haven't done in so long. But again, this is going back in my early 20s. I used to go to a spiritual church. I used to go and sit in church, very much like a regular church, except you'd have somebody up on there doing readings and doing doing platform readings for people. And that was, I didn't really.
For those that don't know, platform readings are basically when the medium stands at the front and says, okay, I've got a woman here and her first name begins with G, and I'm drawn to this woman over here. Can you take it?
Yeah. And you still have, sometimes there's still hymns. The hymns are slightly different. They're a little bit. Oh yeah, there's still hymns. There's still singing.
I've been to spiritual church, but probably only twice.
The beginning and the end is very similar to what you would get in a Catholic or whatever kind of religion you believe in, the ceremony. But the bit in the middle is different, because the bit in the middle is where the host, so to speak, will hand over to that reader for the evening, and they will do their sermon, which will be a 45-minute reading for whoever is out there. And then you finish, and then you have tea and cake after and chat about it. So that was for me was a really great insight and a first step to just going to understand the world a little bit more.
And I think what you've said really is important, because we're losing community in many, many ways, because not many people go to church anymore, and particularly since post-lockdown, a lot of those community activities are starting to die out. So yeah, being able to bring yourself amongst like-minded people is absolutely essential. It does remind me, I think at one podcast we need to talk about mediumship. Would be good. We've not covered mediumship, and past lives we're also going to cover.
Yeah. And the great thing is, if you are looking for a community, we run a psychic development course, and it's something that we are really, really passionate about, because again, time and time again, people are coming to this and just finding their tribe and finding they're not so on their own on this journey. Other people are on this journey, and they're starting to feel understood. And it's just amazing to see these, again, sorry, we keep talking about retreat because it's been quite recent, but seeing people have these revelations on retreat about this. And
I'm not alone.
I'm not
making this up.
Exactly. It's just so comforting. And we cannot deny people's experience. If that's their experience, that is their experience. So that's something that we are really, really trying to develop more and put more focus on and more awareness around. So So yeah, that would be definitely a step for people to come and try. We have various levels. So if you've never ever done anything like this before, we can have an introductory taste and 90-minute session where you can try it out, meet the reader, meet your practitioner that's going to be guiding you, your teacher. And then maybe just start on that introductory journey and start to learn some of the basics.
Because what often puts people off from that previously is like, am I going to be good enough? That's not the attitude. It's not about being, compare and despair like everything in life. But it's not, as I said right at the beginning, if you've got that inclination, if you've got that kind of twinge of, I sense something else is going on, that's enough. Follow that. It's not, so much we like to be good at things and, I want to be good at being a psychic. And actually, it's just about being. It's just about actually the more effort you put in it, the worse it is.
Yes.
So often the training is about how to get yourself out of the way and just allow this to flow through. So it's not about being an expert straight away. So if you've got that inclination, if you've got that kind of sense, absolutely. This, I think, is going out in March. Our next intake is in May, and it's 6 weeks and 8 weeks. Again, just visit the website, and I think it's under What's On, what it is at the moment. That may very well change, but there are courses that we run, and we run those courses 3 times a year virtually, and we're hoping to run them in person in the near future too. But it will, just as Jamie say, give you all the tools, the requisite tools for kind of, protecting your energy, grounding, how to start channeling, how to start connecting with your guides. So it's a real comprehensive course on. And the important thing to stress is that's an ongoing thing. Again, it's not like learning to drive and you drive your test and you pass. It is an ongoing process. So should we close with a card?
Yeah. Let's do it.
Just before we do, as ever, if you've ever got any questions that you would like to ask, send them in either at hello@wellnessfoundry.co.uk or drop us a DM on Instagram. Similarly, if you've got a question about your own life that you want us to tune in and give some advice and some guidance around, you feel free to do that as well. But yes, any subjects, great or small, we would love to hear. We love getting your questions because they always spark us and inspire us to on the next subject. Okay, so we have the 6 of Cups. The 6 of Cups. It's a funny old card, often called the card of nostalgia. I am actually going to say this. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, this card. Oh, I should hold it up to camera. Sorry. There you go. 6 of Cups. In the 6 of Cups, you've got 2 figures, or actually you have 3. One's quite hidden, but there's 2 figures in the foreground, both children, one handing a cup to the other. Hence why this card has very much a childlike quality around it, a nostalgic quality around it. Because one thing we haven't spoken about in today's podcast is a lot of the time we get people saying, oh, well, when I was younger, I used to see spirits, or somebody would come sit on the end of my bed, or I would hear things, or I just knew things would be true.
Imaginary friend, have an imaginary friend.
Imaginary friends, all of that, or go looking for the fairies in the bottom of the garden, all of that stuff. And sadly, what happens is either one of 2 things. One is that people kind of write it off as make-believe and nonsense and all stop believing in that. Or they are so fearful of it because they don't have the proper training. Imagine how magical it would be if, and I said this to a woman once in a reading, but how magic would it be if 6-year-olds were saying, oh, I'm kind of seeing this other world, and parents and society were going, oh, amazing, what could you see? What's going on? And actually support that. Because then by the age of 12, they've been working in that world for 6 years. It would be completely transformative. But what tends to happen is people shut it down and then don't revisit it for another 20 odd years at a kind of minimum. So I would really, really encourage you here of maybe have a little think and a little reflection on what it is that you found curious and illuminating and exciting as a child. I really want you to all to reconnect with that very childlike, that very innocent, that very open-minded, very expansive, younger version of yourself. And is there anything there that has got lost or put aside or put on delay? And I want you to kind of take this as a symbol and a sign to reconnect with that part of yourself. So that, again, that might be your imaginary friend. That might be the fact that you always loved to scribble and draw as a child. That might be that you loved being by the sea. Whatever it is, I just want you to reconnect that once more, because that is an inherent part of you, an innate part of you, because you didn't learn that. You were a child. You hadn't had time to learn that yet. That was your soul. That was a predilection of your soul. And if that has got lost and put to one side, this is your prompt to pick it up again.
And that's the end of this week's episode. We'd love to hear what you think, or suggestions of what we could cover in future. Either leave us a comment if the platform you're listening on allows it, or drop us an email, hello@wellnessfoundry.co.uk. Alternatively, DM us on Instagram. Be sure to hit subscribe or follow to stay up to date with the latest releases. But until next time, love and blessings.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Spirit Level, brought to you by the Wellness Foundry, the home of spiritual wellness. For more information and bookings, visit the website wellnessfoundry.co.uk or find us on Instagram @wellnessfoundry. Don't forget, as a thank you for listening, receive 5% off your first booking by using code PODCAST5 at checkout. Terms and conditions apply.